A kid walks into an empty restaurant, just waiting for his dad. Suddenly, a waiter approaches him with a look of disdain, without asking anything, and starts insulting the kid, trying to kick him out. What this waiter doesn't know is that the kid isn't just some ordinary person. His dad is a restaurant owner. The waiter is about to learn a lesson the hard way. Ethan was 10 years old and loved visiting his dad, Lucas's restaurant. Whenever he could, he would go there before it opened to wait for him. That day was no different. Ethan walked in excited, even though the restaurant was still closed to customers. The staff was arriving and getting everything ready to open. He walked over to a table and sat down, watching the details of the place. The smell of food filled the air, and the clinking of utensils being set up indicated that everything was ready. Ethan loved being there. It was a special place for him where he always felt at home. But at that moment, something was about to happen. A waiter he had never seen before looked at him strangely, without saying a word. His face tense as he started to approach. Ethan didn't know it yet, but this day was one he would never forget. He was sitting quietly, tapping his foot under the table, when he noticed the waiter getting closer. The man looked almost angry, as if he didn't like what he saw, and stopped next to him. Ethan sat at the table with his arms crossed over his chest. "What are you doing here?" the waiter asked in a harsh voice. Ethan looked up, a bit surprised. "I'm waiting for my dad," he replied calmly. The waiter raised an eyebrow and let out a sarcastic laugh. He was new at the restaurant, having just been hired a few days ago, and didn't know all the ins and outs yet. But there was one thing he thought he knew. A black kid in simple clothes sitting alone in the place before it opened made no sense to him. "Really? Your dad works here?" he asked mockingly. Ethan frowned, not fully understanding the hostility in his tone. "Yeah, my dad owns a restaurant," he said casually. The waiter sighed, now sure that the kid is lying. "Look, buddy, I don't have time for games. This restaurant is fancy, not a place for begging or trying to steal something. Get out of here before I call security." Ethan felt his face burning. His heart was racing. He had never been treated like this before. "I'm not stealing anything," he said, trying to stay calm. "My dad really owns this place." The waiter rolled his eyes in disbelief. "Sure, and I'm the president," he said sarcastically, then leaned in closer to Ethan. "I won't say it again. Get out now." Ethan swallowed hard. He wanted to yell that this was ridiculous, but he felt something stuck in his throat. He looked around, but the other staff were busy and didn't notice. Something was going on. The waiter grabbed Ethan by the arm and pulled him out of his seat. "Come on, get out of here," he said, squeezing the kid's arm. Ethan tried to break free. "Let me go," he shouted, his voice trembling. Just then, before the waiter could take another step, a deep voice rang out in the restaurant. "What's going on here?" The waiter suddenly turned around and saw a tall man with a serious face standing at the entrance. He was wearing a formal shirt and had a stern look. It was Lucas, the owner of the restaurant. The waiter, still holding Ethan's arm, frowned and said, "Who are you?" with an attitude. Lucas stepped forward and replied without hesitation, "I'm the owner of this restaurant." The waiter's eyes widened in that moment. He realized he'd made a mistake he couldn't fix. The restaurant, which had been buzzing with the noise of preparation for its opening, fell silent for a few seconds. The waiter felt a chill run down his spine when he heard those words. "I'm the owner of this restaurant." He immediately let go of Ethan's arm, as if he'd been shocked. The kid stepped back, rubbing the spot where the waiter had gripped him tightly. His eyes were filled with tears, but he stood his ground. Lucas walked slowly toward them, his gaze fixed on the waiter. His face was calm, but his expression had an edge to it. "So, can you tell me what's going on here exactly?" he asked. He crossed his arms, and the waiter swallowed hard, feeling a lump in his throat, but he tried to keep his cool. "I thought this kid was barging into the restaurant. He said he was waiting for his dad, but I didn't realize he was your son." Lucas took a deep breath to stay calm, glancing down at Ethan, who still seemed shaken, then looked back at the waiter. "Why did you think he was barging in?" he asked, his voice steady but firm. The waiter glanced around like he was looking for an escape, realizing the other staff were now watching the scene. He felt trapped. "Well, I thought he was a beggar," he whispered, trying to look away. "Beggar? Lucas repeated the word. He took one step forward. Did you look at my son? Without asking him anything or trying to understand, you decided he can't be here. The waiter opened and closed his mouth a few times. I didn't know. I didn't mean to. Lucas raised an eyebrow. You humiliated my son. You grabbed his arm and tried to kick him out. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a red flag. The waiter's face turned red, and his words felt heavy. The silence around them was suffocating. The other staff didn't say anything, but their annoyance was clear in their looks. Ethan, who had been silent until then, finally spoke up. I tried to explain, but he didn't want to listen. He just looked at me and decided that I can't be here, or whatever, like he was expecting that answer. Then he turned back to the waiter. What would you do if you were in my shoes? The waiter didn't know how to respond. He'd never felt this small before. He thought just saying sorry would fix things, but now he realized the damage was already done before he could say anything. Lucas took a deep breath and made a decision. This restaurant doesn't need employees who treat people like this. You're fired. The waiter's eyes widened. Wait, I can change. Lucas interrupted him. It's not about making a mistake. Everyone messes up, but your mistake wasn't an accident. It was a choice. You chose to treat my son with disrespect. You chose to act all arrogant in front of him. The waiter turned around and walked away to grab his things. The silence in the restaurant was only broken when he disappeared through the door. Then Lucas leaned down and put his hands on Ethan's shoulders. Are you okay? Ethan said slowly, still thinking about what happened. Yeah, Dad, I just don't get why he did that to me. Lucas sighed and ran his hand over his son's head. Some people only see others through the color of their skin, their clothes, their looks, and think they can treat them however they want. But that's not right. I get that now, Ethan said, understanding better. You did the right thing, Dad. And you did too, kid. You tried to stand up for yourself. Honestly, it's important to speak the truth. Don't let anyone undervalue you. Ethan smiled softly for the first time since everything started. He really felt safe. The restaurant might have been empty at that moment, but there was a big lesson learned. The waiter rushed out without looking back, and the silence was still thick in the air. The other employees who had paused to watch what happened started exchanging glances. Some were shaking their heads, disapproving of the guy who just got fired. Ethan was still standing next to his dad, feeling a mix of relief and sadness he never expected. Honestly, I can't believe he's going through something like this, especially in his dad's restaurant. Lucas noticed his son's thoughtful expression and put a hand on his shoulder. What's wrong, Ethan? Is everything okay? The boy hesitated for a moment before answering. I just don't understand. Dad, why did he treat me like that without even knowing me? Lucas sighed and looked around the restaurant. Unfortunately, son, some people see others in a messed up way. They judge based on skin color, what they wear, or things that shouldn't even matter. Ethan looked at his hands, deep in thought. But that's just not fair. Lucas nodded. Exactly. And that's why we need to teach people to be better. Today, that guy learned a lesson. I don't know if it'll change him, but I know it won't be the last time. He would never forget what happened. The boy stayed quiet for a while, processing his dad's words. He didn't want to hold on to any grudges, but the pain from what had happened was still there. The other staff members began to approach. One of the waitresses, named Anna, leaned down and smiled at Ethan. Hey, Ethan, I'm really sorry about what happened. If I'd known what was going on, I would have stepped in earlier. The chef, a guy named Marcus, chimed in. Hey, we're all glad to have you here. We know how much your dad means to us. Ethan realized that there was just one person who had treated him badly. There were plenty of others who respected him. Thanks, he said, smiling modestly. Lucas looked at the staff and then at his son. You should... Respect is the foundation of everything, and that's what I want for this restaurant. No one will be judged based on their appearance. Everyone will be treated with dignity. Ethan took a deep breath and felt better. I love this place. Dad, I don't want anything to scare me away from coming here. Lucas smiled and ran his hand through his son's hair, saying, Nothing will happen. You belong here just like anyone else who comes with respect. The preparations for the restaurant's opening continued slowly. The atmosphere returned to normal, but that incident would never be forgotten. Ethan learned an important lesson about the world, and Lucas reinforced the values of justice and respect later on when they opened. The restaurant opened its doors to customers, and he stayed close to his dad, watching everything going on. He realized that the world isn't always fair, but he knew he had someone by his side to protect him. More than that, he understood he could be part of the change, showing through his actions that no one should be treated differently just because of how they look. In the end, a person's true value isn't in their skin color, but in their heart.